Well, Rob, you ready to dive into the fourth world?
I got to tell you, I can't believe you guys. I mean, this is the fourth event I've done panels for you guys.
You are our number one unpaid intern. Let me tell you.
I have to tell you, the people that you line up for me to talk to is an amazing joy. I mean, and the next
Oscar winners. I mean, Jesus Christ!
We're talking Tom King and Cecil. I don't want to mispronounce her name.
Castellucci.
Castellucci. What she probably doesn't know is that she and I were in a movie together.
Oh my God! Well,
yes, we were.
I'm going to get out of your way, man, and let you take it away, Rob. Always good to talk to you.
Well, thank you. It's great. I'll start in. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, however you identify from across the 28 known galaxies, as we heard in Superman the movie, I'm Robert Meyer Burnett once again, and I have a panel I'm so excited about, as we just announced who our panelists are. I can't say enough about Tom King. I mean, what a legend. And of course, Cecil, she has been she's been in a band. She's written novels. She has written many a great comic. And she and I both appeared together in the movie Staroids. That was about people lining up to see The Phantom Menace back in 1999. I didn't line up, but I tried to pay somebody to for their spot in line. And we're both in the same movie. So welcome them both to this panel. And we're going to get our Kirby on. So
Philadelphia, that's a fucking great title.
Isn't that a great title? I mean, it's amazing. It is a true honor to be with both of you. And I feel like I should reach back, and maybe I will. I'm going to reach back and pull off this, because this is one of my favorite. God love DC for putting out Commandy and this. And bringing the fourth world back. I mean, I guess it's never gone anywhere. Between the Snyder Cut and what you guys are doing, I think Darkseid's real now. It's going to be great. So, first of all, to jump right into it, I guess from the both of you, how do you each? How do you feel? Oh, is it Cecil? Did I say Cecil?
No, Cecil, Cecil.
Cecil, Cecil. They're both acceptable. But I just want to say it's my birthday today. And
happy birthday.
This is like the best birthday gift ever, because I've always wanted to sit down and have a beer and talk Fourth World with Tom. So this is a great birthday present, Baltimore Comic-Con.
Well, I just
like seeing your face. I miss, we go to cons and we see each other all the time, and then we just disappear. And it's such a pleasure just to see. I did my first signing ever in my life, and she was sitting next to me.
That's right. That's right.
So many years ago. So that warms my heart. Makes me feel that the world might not end.
Me too.
Well, then it's a great. Let me celebrate the joy. But to ask the two of you, having such deep comic roots as you have, what does Jack the King Kirby's Fourth World mean to the two of you? And when did you first discover the stories? I mean, did you read Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen? How did you discover the Fourth World, and what do you think about it? And how about the Black Racer? I'm a big Black Racer fan. Is he coming in?
Oh, I go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Go first.
Right, man, that's a bunch of questions. Let me see.
Sorry.
Growing up, I would say this is sadly typical of my generation of kids who sort of raised in the 90s, where I came to Kirby later. Like, I came to him as a child. I saw Kirby as sort of, I didn't like his art. When I went through the back, I was a back issue hunter as a child, and when I found the Kirby issue, I was like, I don't know what this is. And I probably first encountered the Fourth World through John Byrne's Fourth World stuff, which I was a big John Byrne fan as a kid, and then through Walt Simonson's Orion series, which I loved and read it as a little older kid. And I didn't go back to the Kirby stuff until I think when I tried to go back into comics. So when I sort of made the transition from my other career, so I was in like my early 30s, there was a list that it was like the best 100 comics of all time, and on there was Kirby's Fourth World, and that's when I read it, and you realize it's sort of you're reading the source code to comics at the same time. It's very
or the anti-life equation.
Or the anti-life equation. That's right.
And what about you?
I mean, I'd always been aware of Kirby, but I think it's the same as Tom. Like I didn't, it wasn't like that wasn't my go-to, sort of person. And for me, after I was finished with Shade the Changing Girl, I guess, Tom had just started Mr. Miracle, and I was looking for a new project. And I actually was like, well, I can't do Female Furies because Tom's doing Mr. Miracle. So I'd gone through the encyclopedia of, DC comic book characters and come into the DC offices with like a bunch of different teams and characters that I wanted to reboot. And after a conversation with Dan, I'd said something like, he was every single team that I wanted to do, he's like, oh, Jeff Lemire's doing that, or this person's doing that, or whatever, and it was all boy stuff. And I was like, oh, where's your Handmaid's Tale, And he was like, if you can figure out the Female Furies and the Handmaid's Tale, then we can have a conversation. And then he went under his desk and he brought out the Fourth World Omnibus and was like, do your homework. And
you got one for free, damn it.
Yeah. And so I dove in and was just blown away by the robust, intense world building and philosophical ideas and thought process about life and the meaning of life and the universe and love and hate and trauma. I just thought it was incredible. And so, there are so many threads to pull on. I'm sure, Tom agrees with me. But for me, I found my story in Mr. Miracle #9. But yeah, it was, and I didn't know whether or not, it was like, here's your challenge, gauntlet thrown. And then, even if nothing had ever happened, what a pure joy to just read that book and really sort of train at the foot of a master, I felt like.
Well, I have to ask the two of you, do you have to pick a side? Do you have to pick New Genesis or Apocalypse? I mean, is it one or the other? Is it the dark or the light? Or can you both sort of pick from both? I mean, did you have to choose? Do you have a favorite side? I'm asking, I guess.
I think part of the genius of the Fourth World and why it has layers that you wouldn't expect it to is at first it seems like a very cartoony, you think, oh, this is just Kirby sort of in his Hanna-Barbera days with, the stuff to 6-year-olds, good guys versus bad guys. But then when you actually look at New Genesis, you have sort of this underclass of bugs that are treated very poorly.
Yeah.
You have this idea that explored extensively, but the idea that Highfather made this deal where he gave away his son in order to achieve a peace that didn't last, which was a pretty shitty thing for a dad to do.
And it failed.
And it was a total. He gave up a son and he
that
totally
he purposely wanted to fail.
Yeah.
So that he could start a war again. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Continue, Tom. Continue.
But that's exactly it. It's like it's not as good guy versus bad guy as you would first expect, with the exception of Darkseid sort of being this, the symbol for everything Jack Kirby hated, fascism and the lack of thought, the lack of freedom, so that you always root against him. But I mean, so you asked me which side. I would say I think that probably Apocalypse has cooler characters.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't argue with the coolness of Darkseid, with Kanto, with Desaad, with Wonder Burn. They're more fun on Darkseid's side.
Agreed.
Female Furies.
Yeah, agreed.
Granny goodness.
I think the Darkseid is always more interesting, anyways, because there's more sort of drama inherent in as a writer, putting the lens on that and trying to find the heart in the fire pits, I guess, Yeah, so I'm going to go Apocalypse as well. But at the same time, you can't have one without the other. They work in tandem, and there's a reason why it works. Once again, because we're really delving, or Kirby was really delving into sort of what the human condition is, and sort of what our fundamental questions are of good and evil, and how to make the world better. But how trying to make the world better can sometimes you can really do it in a very wrong way, by trying to make things what you think is better. And that's the danger, and I think that touches upon the sort of fascism stuff that he was very much against,
Well, now there's been different, like you pointed out, different artistic interpretations of the Fourth World characters, and Darkseid has been a perennial favorite as a DC villain. We've seen him in the animated shows that were coming out, and of course he was integral in things like Final Crisis and other large DC storylines, the Cosmic Odyssey that I just reread recently. Did you look to different runs throughout the history of not just what we saw in the omnibus, but like you both touched on previous runs? Is there a definitive run of these characters for you, or is it just, do you always go back to the original Kirby?
Definitive. I mean, I think different people have done amazing things with the characters, but yeah, I don't think Simonson, for pure art genius, if you look at Simonson's Orion stuff, you just can't. I reread that recently, and it's breathtaking, the stuff he was doing. It's next level. And it's not just his art, because he did backups in each one. The backups are by Frank Miller, they're by Dave Gibbons, they're by the best people in the industry at that time. So that would probably be, to me, Mr. Miracle, we always went back to the Kirby. Doing the movie now, it's going back to the Kirby, but I think Walt's accomplishments are just beyond brilliant.
Well, I guess what I was trying to get at is do you borrow certain elements from other writers and incorporate them into your, because you have to redefine whether you're going to do the film version of it or more comics versions of it. You have to sort of define what is the canon. What is canonical, what belongs in the universe, and you have to say what is definitive. Is that difficult, and do you borrow and mix and match? And do you, as writers, have to adhere to a certain canonical fealty to what Kirby did, or are you allowed a lot of leeway to change things around?
I'm going to go before Tom does, because Tom has that extra added element of the film stuff. So, and I'm sure that'll have a different spice flavor on top of that. But for me, I really took Kirby's. That's the space that I lived in, and I really took the issue Mr. Miracle #9 of Kirby's run and exploded that issue out. So that issue is where Scott and Barda have their meet cute at Himon's place, and it is because Barda is trying to bring this woman back, O'Reilly, and there is no Scott and Barda without Mr. Miracle #9. And for me, what I felt like, there's this one female Fury, but it felt like so much of the story of the female Furies and so much of the story of Granny Goodness was left sort of in the gutters. And so I just tried to sort of unfold that from there. Like, how did Granny become who she became? How did Barda, because Barda's change of heart comes from what happens to O'Reilly in this moment, in Mr. Miracle #9. There's no future for Scott and Barda if they don't have that moment, and if they don't, if Barda doesn't realize how horrific her planet is, and what Willix does to O'Reilly, which I didn't change in my book. It's exactly, he makes her dance to death in Kirby's. So for me, I plucked panels from so many things, like the baby exchange, with Orion and Scott, like everything, Tigra, Hegra, like Beautiful Dreamer, everything that I put in my book is exactly from Kirby's. And I can point to, I don't know it off the top of my head anymore, but like I can say this panel specifically comes from this issue of the New Gods, or of the Forever People, or of, whatever. And I really just tried to unfold that story and do it from, just tell the story from the women's perspective.
I love hearing that you were that specific. Mean, from a writing perspective, and for me as a reader, I love to know that, again, so much thought was put into what you were doing, and how, and to go back to even specific panels. I mean, now that makes me want to go back and read your stuff again, which is great. Well, what about you, Tom? Were you that specific?
Yeah, I mean, we were, but I think it's important, at least from my perspective, to say that what makes the Fourth World and New Gods and the Kirby stuff excellent is that it's a deeply flawed work. Like if I wrote the introduction to the new Absolute version, which is a gorgeous book, and I wanted to specifically say, like, if you approach this,
wait a minute, hang on a minute, that hasn't come out yet, has it?
I have a copy. Yeah, I think it's out.
Is it out?
Oh, yeah, it's Absolute Volume 1. If you take off the cover, it looks like a mother box. It's so freaking cool.
I need to. I don't have that.
Man, it's
I need to get that.
And
flawed. Yes, agreed. It is flawed. There's some there's some
flawed,
deeply messed up stuff in there.
Well, I mean, beyond yes, there are deeply messed up stuff, but also it's just like as a story, like if you were to sit down and just read it, it's a chore. It's not. I don't want anyone to be like, oh my god, I'm gonna. It's like if you pick up. If you're a comic book fan, you can give the DKR to somebody. No, the story still works, even though it's 30 years later. This story doesn't really work. This is Jack Kirby editing himself in a very angry place in his life, where he just wanted. He's just like, I have 1,000 ideas in my head, and I'm gonna blow them out. And so, like, it goes in this direction, that direction, and you're following one thread. You're like, wait, that thread went over here, and this went, and now we're in, and now. And then the tone switches. You're like, well, now I'm a child's comic. Now I'm in a grown-up's comic. Now, it's just all. But that's what's wonderful about it is that it's like it's the White Album. You're like, I don't want a song about piggies, but because they can do a song about piggies, they can do this other experimental, revolutions. Like, there's nothing holding Kirby back. And I think a lot of people have come along after him and sort of, and tried to shape it and take the edges off and connect some of the. For example, the Fourth World, that concept. What a cool title, the Fourth World. But there's nothing in the book that says what the fourth world is. Yeah. It's that literally even that phrase. There's no what is the first three worlds? It's not in the book.
Totally. And what I find so interesting, Tom, is that there are so many different threads that you can pull on, and so many, like the first thing that I pitched really was The Handmaid's Tale in the Fourth World with Earth and all that. And let me tell you, it was depressing. I mean, everybody at DC was like, wow, this is really good. But because there's so much stuff with Lump and like the stuff that like he does on Earth, and when the female Furies go there, and like there's, and then all those, the war that goes on, like that Earth and it's so it's so massive, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then with the Jimmy Olsen stuff and Superman and like it's quite a lot. But I think what's so great about it is that there are so many deep ideas that I think Kirby was trying to sort of get to. And so for me, that's why I say for me, I really just took that one issue and blew it out to make a whole story. And and I feel like, Tom, you took the elements of sort of trauma, and trying to make a life after trauma, and sort of blew that up. So it's kind of like we get to occupy our own spaces. And even though they're completely unconnected, our two books, I kind of like to look at them as like, they don't occupy the same space. So you can read them together. Absolutely. And they make total sense, but they're also completely unconnected, and I think that's the strength of when you have a big robust world to play in, is that anybody can take up a thread and you can read all the extra pieces of it, and you understand what's sort of in the whole.
Yeah, it's a little bit like reading the Bible. Like I remember whenever you're at that point in your life, you're like, I'm going to read this. People brag about this book like it's the Bible. So you actually pick it up and start reading, and there's a lot of begots in this, and the stories don't connect, and you're like, this is terrible writing. I can't understand. But then you're like, then you see little threads here. You're like, oh my God, there's a huge story here and a huge story there. It's very much the equivalent of that to me.
Agreed.
When you pitch a story and I guess the editorial department, or you're given the go ahead, are you limited by what you can and can't do with established lore, or are you given pretty much carte blanche to do what you want? Do you have to, are there limitations to how your imagination can go, or are you completely, unfettered by where you want it? Like Handmaid's Tale in the Fourth World, that is a great pitch. And I'd be like, you go girl. But did someone say you can't go that far?
I mean, no. I mean, after I handed in my extremely depressing sort of genetic experiments, thing, we sort of landed on, the Me Too on Apocalypse, just to simplify the story. And basically, it is the same thing. I mean, my story is basically The Handmaid's Tale and Me Too on Apocalypse, while staying in that world. But as far as once we landed on that, because I wasn't in continuity, I think the sort of saying at DC, the unspoken saying at DC is like, it's not if you're out of continuity, it's not in continuity until they decide it's in continuity. So I kind of felt, I felt completely free. I knew what my issues were. I knew, I had 6 issues and I had my story and nobody, everybody knew what I was doing. And I had a great editorial team, Jamie Rich and Brittany Holzer. And it was, it was unfettered for me.
That's good to hear. I mean, again, the adding Me Too on Apocalypse. I mean, my God, who wouldn't want to? What a great idea! I can only imagine. I would love to have been on the receiving end of that pitch. I'd be like, yes, let's do that. What about you, Tom?
Our book went slightly before Cecil, so we were sort of like, by the time I feel Cecil was getting like Black Label had sort of become a thing, and more DC was exploring that stuff. So when I started the book, I immediately told the editors, I was like, well, this is something that might be happening in his head, or might be happening on another universe, or might be happening, so don't worry about it. And for some reason, they accepted that. I don't know, they weren't reading their emails that day, but yes. So that sort of fiction, and they never actually asked me, like, is this real or is this not? Because they were like, anytime I did something extreme, they'd be like, oh, well, Tom told us it could be in his head. So so I hid behind that. But by the time the series had finished, the whole concept of, I don't know, which to me was always the heart of DC, the Superman, All-Star Superman, the DKRs, the Watchmen, sort of these limited series that are in continuity. If like Cecil said, if they're good, then they become continuity. But they live in their conception a little bit outside of, having written myself a lot of in-continuity comics as a Cecil. These live a little bit outside of continuity, the fact that you don't have to deal with things that would interfere in sort of a complete vision.
Right.
Things like crossovers and stuff like that.
Like when Tom was writing Batman, when I started writing Batgirl, and I had to deal with what he's doing. That's what you have to do when you're in continuity. But when you're just a little bit outside of continuity, you have to stay true to the characters, of course. Like you can't make Big Barda Little Barda all of a sudden, you can't, I mean, I guess you could, but you'd have to have a good reason, that's the thing that you have to pay attention most to is staying true to the character when you're outside. Yeah, and I was coming from the Young Animal thing. So I think, right. They were like, yeah, do a 6-issue miniseries that's, out of continuity. And your book was a success. And so it was kind of like, it could be different, but like people know the characters now, or, and also, the Me Too movement was going on. That was when it was just beginning. And, I know Adriana Mello, I want to give her a big shout out. And I felt, really called to, sort of speak about things that, I don't know, like, there's a lot of things like when you read the Female Furies where it's like, yep, women are still talking about this. And I don't mean like women in the book. I mean, women in our world. And those power dynamics. And I feel like, the one thing I'm most proud of, and I think Adriana is as well, is that, Granny Goodness is a terrible person. She's the most horrible woman in the world. And she's the character that I feel the sorriest for, because of what I imagine Kirby, actually put her through. Because if you have just inherently, when you have a character who's the only woman of the old guard of Darkseid's, cronies, the only woman, and she's the one put in charge of the orphanage. I mean, you're gonna she's gonna be pissed, and that's gonna shape her in some way. And so, and I feel like, women have felt like that for a long time, where, it's like, you can't break that ceiling no matter what you do. You're given the woman's work. And how does that how does that affect you as you grow older and bitter when you know that you could probably be a better leader of Apocalypse than Darkseid? There, I said it.
I love that. Can you write that comic? Granny Goodness ascends to the leadership of Apocalypse.
Sure.
I want
to DC.
I want to see that. What a great idea that is. I mean, I especially in the post Me Too movement, what happens on Apocalypse when that dream is realized? I'd love to see that. But now, what about the two of you? So, how much does reader feedback or matter? Like, does it matter to you, or do you not care?
I care, and it doesn't matter. Both things are. I think that's probably. Yes, I wish I didn't care. I wish when people said they hated something, I'm like, fuck it. I'm an artist. I have to make what I make. But I'm also an artist, so I'm scared of what I do, and I'm never confident that anything is good. So when a lot of people don't like something, I see what they don't like, and I can't help but seeing it. But it is our literal professional jobs to not just be leaves on the wind. We have to sort of have a point of view, or else we're not going to make creative stuff. I mean, there have been tons of comic books that are leaves on the wind. There are whole comic companies that are dedicated to that, and I have respect for them. If you want to read old Charlton's comics from the 70s, whatever the trend was, Charlton's was going to send 16 cheap comics after it. But to make really good comics, I think you have to sort of have your perspective.
I think I agree with Tom. Absolutely. Of course, it kind of hurts your feelings sometimes, but at the same time, that's our job, is to, put it out there, and that's what we do. And, but I think for me, what was really hard was, I got a lot of hate for, for what I did with the Female Furies. And that was difficult because a lot of the comments were that I knew nothing about the Fourth World. I didn't read, any of Jack Kirby. I was disrespecting the characters. I knew nothing. I was stupid, all these things. And that was painful because it was like, no, I actually could point to which panel in this, but like, I actually you didn't do your homework, like I did my homework. That's frustrating because I think Tom is the same. We put a lot of care and thought into what we're doing, and it's not willy-nilly, when we make a choice about a character, it's because we're making a decision about it, and it's thoughtful. And so when and especially as a woman writing something that was fraught, that was difficult, and it didn't hurt my feelings because I knew that I'd done my homework and that I knew what I was talking about, but it was annoying and continues to be annoying because there was so much specific thought into what I was doing, and I feel as though Jack Kirby and I would have a great conversation over like a whiskey about about the Female Furies and about Granny Goodness and about Beautiful Dreamer and all the things that he missed because he was of his time and that I picked up because I'm from my time. And I think that, Tom, come and have a, let's all go, me, you, and Jack have a whiskey one day together and talk. I think that would be a good conversation as well.
Well, you just touched on something that I think is I've read comics for 40 years, but what you just said about how you are bringing something in the concerns of our time today, your time, issues that matter to you, and are adding them to a mythology that's existed for almost 50 years, is what continuing comics is all about. I mean, so often fans are mired in what they believe a character. They're so, I don't know, strict or stringent or whatever. They want this character to be just this way. And the thing that keeps a character vital is when it's reinterpreted for the modern age, and what you both can bring to those characters and add to the mythology. And I think that's sometimes forgotten in you think about the great comics that you brought up, Tom. whether it was Dark Knight Returns, whether it's Frank Miller's Ronin, or whether it's Watchmen, or I mean, Watchmen took it was going to be the Charlton the characters, and then they changed it, and then Alan Moore got to take it's not going to be Captain Atom or the Question, it's going to be Rorschach and Dr. Manhattan, and if you're not allowed to do that, then the comics medium and indeed the stories are sort of they're arrested, and they don't stay modern, and they don't stay relevant. And I think it's really important, Cecil, what you said about that, and how you're absolutely right. I think Kirby would have adored what you both had done, and I'd like to hear more about that. Like, how do you take a character and bring a modern sensibility to that character, yet still retain the core of who that character was when it was conceived? Perhaps, well, sometimes, I mean, there are comic writers. You guys are writing characters that are 80 years old now. So how do you do that?
I think you do your homework. I think that's what you do. You go to the source material and you read it. Like when I took over Batgirl, I read all of Batgirl. When I did the Female Furies, I read all of all the Fourth World. When I did Shade the Changing Girl, I read the Ditko Shade the Changing Man, and I read the Milligan Shade the Changing Man. You do your homework, and you go in there and you crack it up and you put it through the lens of where we are now, and you try to be thoughtful, and you bring your heart, and you do the best you can, and then you pass the baton on to the future so that somebody can pick something up in 20, 30 years from what you did.
Now wait, I got to break in. This is Tevia Smolka asks, question for Tom and Cecil. This is not Fourth World related, but I'm just wondering how you would bring back the Question Renee Montoya back into the main universe.
Wait, she just appeared in the Lois Lane comic by Greg Rucka. She's in the main universe. So if you're reading that Lois Lane comic, which is very good, there's some Renee Montoya question in it.
There you go. Back to the Fourth World then. So Tom, do you feel the same way? I mean, do you go back and do that kind of research into the characters you're approaching?
Yes, of course. Well, I mean, I think what I find interesting about that is that, to bring it back to the Fourth World. So the Fourth World was created 67, 68 by a guy in his mid-50s who had already done as much as you can do in comics, almost as much as you can do as a human being if you put his war experience and his immigrant parent. Like his biography is insane. But what's amazing about it is it's very contemporary. It's Jack trying to take on 1967, not him trying to recreate some high of superheroes in the 40s. So we have the forever people. We have space hippies. We have Black Racer, who's a Vietnam veteran, and we have the entire concept of the characters. I mean, it was very much Kirby himself, and the spirit of the Fourth World was, I'm going to create a story, but it's about today. Yes, it's fantastical, but it's very contemporary as well. And so to me, if you came to the Kirby material and were just, I'm going to make more stuff that's just like Kirby, you'd almost be not doing what Kirby did. You'd almost be defying him, because he was trying to be modern. So if you're going to reject modernity, you're rejecting him in some way, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's why it's like, when you think about the Female Furies are so amazing, and Big Barda. I mean, Kirby loved women, and he loved writing women, but he was also writing it in 1967, so that was his idea of what, women's equality and women's liberation was tempered by his time, and we know that he wanted to do a Female Fury solo book. There's a cover for it that he penciled. So, it's not that he didn't want to tell those stories, but when you actually look at the Female Furies, that they don't get as much screen time as, or Big Barda, like she gets more screen time than, the Female Furies, but he was limited by what he was doing. But at the same time, he's looking at science, the science of the day, thinking about dark matter, thinking about, astrophysics, thinking about the space program, thinking about DNA, CRISPR technology before it even really existed. He's thinking about all of those things because that's what was cutting edge at his time. But, there was only so much that we knew then about, we didn't even have a picture of Pluto yet, so, you can only do what you can do. So that's why I say, it's sort of like, especially with comics, what you're doing is you're bringing it into the day that we're in. and then you're leaving some threads in a baton for someone, down the line. They're going to take it up and reinvent it for their day. I mean, I did the same thing with Shade, like I said, I mean.
Well, the fact that you read, I remember even like when Vertigo first came out, when they made the transition, like Swamp Thing was a regular book, and then it transitioned over to Vertigo, and Neil Gaiman had done, I think, Black Orchid, and then he started on with Sandman. I mean, there was so much interesting innovation that was happening in like the 80s, and comics were really starting to come into their own, and with the direct sale market, and more female readers were coming in. I think Death, the character of Death, brought a lot of female readers in. Now we're sort of in a transitional period where, with COVID and what's going on with the direct sale market, and it's a crazy time for comics, and it's really up to you, both of you, as innovative storytellers, to keep the medium going.
Well, Tom and I have talked about this. Because, I mean, I also write young adult books, and, I write young adult comic books. And I mean, maybe the direct market is fumbling a little bit, but, the YA kids comic books, I mean, is alive and well and doing great. So, I think, I don't know. I'm sure we'll do what we can, but also I'm going to write more graphic novels as well, because I like doing that as well.
Sure. Well, what about you, Tom? I mean, you've become a superstar, and now you're working on what, presumably, seeing what's going on with even with the Snyder Cut. I mean, Zack Snyder was on his way toward literally bringing the fourth world to the screen. We saw hints of it in Batman v Superman. Obviously, now he's doing the Snyder Cut. We just saw Darkseid in the first trailer. What a great jumping onto the screen. What does it mean for you? Are you working with, how do you approach the fourth world when you have somebody else sort of leading the way and bringing us? I mean, I got to tell you, as a longtime comic fan, that one scene, the nightmare Batman scene in Batman v Superman, where we actually see Earth being turned into Apocalypse with the Omega, I don't know, on the ground. I lost my shit. I'm like, oh my God, like, we're gonna see the fourth world on screen. I mean, I can't believe it. Now you're writing it. I can't tell you, as somebody who's a longtime fan, what I mean. And now we're gonna see Darkseid in the Zack Snyder Justice League. I'm just beside myself. What's it like for you to be at the forefront of writing this?
It's hard. It's really hard. It's very stressful.
I didn't mean to touch on a sore subject. I just wanted to tell you I'm excited.
I am hugely excited. But if I let my brain touch that, it's almost like when you're writing Batman. So I'm sort of trained to do this. If I ever let myself think, holy crap, I'm writing Batman, I'll just stop writing. I'll be like, I can't take this. So I have to kind of compartmentalize that aspect of it and just focus on, okay, I just have to write a scene between two people. Or if it occurred to me, this stuff, when I put this, I can't talk about the movie at all, right? It has to all be these little platitudes and bullshit. So I apologize for that. So I'm just using, but if I'm writing a scene between two people, it's like, nobody's ever seen these two people on screen before. How can if I get distracted by that, I'll go crazy. So I focus on the humanness, and I try to create, when it's over and on a screen and people are shouting, I'll realize the importance of all that stuff. But I have to put it to the side, or else I'll think you can never treat these characters as too precious, or else you won't dig into them. You won't get into you won't find who they are as people. So yeah, I think that's. But oh man, I mean, sometimes I look at these. I'm working on the movie right now. This week some days are comic week, some days are movie week, because I'm in a movie week right now, and it's insane that I'm doing this for a living. Yeah, it's crazy. I don't want to think about it.
I literally cannot wait to see what you and Ava come up with. I'm so excited. Can't wait.
Oh, I'm a big collector of Hot Toys figures, which is like the Tiffany collection of action figures, and
I would have never guessed from.
I have to tell you, the idea of getting a Big Barda and a Mr. Miracle figure because they're in a movie. Mr. Miracle is one of my favorites since I was a little kid, Mr. Miracle's costume, which really hasn't changed much, is one of my favorite, and Big Barda too. Those two costumes, they appealed to me when I was very, very young, and they appealed to me as a middle-aged man with one foot in his grave. And if I could get those figures, because to see them in a movie, I'm telling you, man, this is childhood dreams made real, and we live in this world where who would have thought? You know, I'm still amazed. People, if somebody asked me 20 years ago if I thought there'd be an Avengers movie, I'd be like, right. No.
I would like for their, I like Barbie dolls. I always have. And, I have all the Wonder Woman Barbie dolls, and I've got a Batgirl Barbie doll, and I would very much like to have a Big Barda Barbie doll. So let's put that out into the
How cool would that be? You know, I love when Barbie, I've got a few, believe it or not, I have a few Barbie dolls from Star Trek Barbies, you know.
I have those.
Yeah, and I'm a fan, and Tonner, they don't make Tonner dolls anymore. I don't know if you saw the Tonner, they did a whole line of DC female characters. Their Batgirl doll was amazing. Now they've gone out of business, and their figures are huge on the secondary market. But I'm with you. Now, can I ask you, since you brought it up, do you have a favorite era of Barbie dolls?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I mean, I gotta go with my original Barbie that I had in the 70s. You know, those are my it was a ballerina Barbie doll. She had a great I think it was Nutcracker Suite or something. So yeah, I'm just gonna go 70s.
Tom, do you collect action figures? I know you've got some on your shelf behind you.
My daughter, who's also back there, that's her firing a gun at Disneyland, is loves superhero toys. That's like her. She's my most. When I was a kid, you know, a typical Generation X latchkey kid, like all I did all day was play GI Joes and make adventures, which turned out to be the best training for what I do for a living. And I should just not gone to school and done that. But my daughter takes after me and loves to sit on the floor with plastic. So anyone who knows, when I go to cons, I used to buy literal tons and tons of toys. So mostly the Justice League Unlimited toys are my daughter's favorites. And I think right now, I have them all, including the rare Big Barda one. Maybe there's like one or two. But
yeah, I'd like to get that. I'd like
there's
to get
like
that
4
one.
of them. So.
Tom, we were the same, because that's what I did too. I mean, I just had like action figures, and I mean, they all played together. The action figures, the Barbie dolls, the the Star Trek, Spock and Kirk. You know, everybody was everybody's boyfriend and girlfriend, big, small. You know, they all hung out, and it was just worlds. You know, I used to call it playing planets, and my mom would just find like action figures and dolls like in every room of the house, and I'd be like, "Don't touch it! They're about to go to war!" You know.
Man, I played with dolls the same way you did, and my sister had like the 4-story Barbie dream house with the elevator with the string that went up and down, and I would use that as like Bruce Wayne's house. So
I had to build that one Christmas, or the whatever modern version of it, and it was the worst build I've ever done. It was an all-day Christmas thing where, eventually you give up and you watch the YouTube video and you're just like, I hate life, and your kid's like, you want a cookie, Daddy? And you're like, I'm gonna get this goddamn elevator working. Yes.
Well, when you're a kid, they never make civilian play sets or anything. So like if you want to have Bruce Wayne go somewhere as Bruce Wayne, he doesn't have his Lambo to drive somewhere. It's a bummer because you can't do that. So you'd have to, if you had a sister, you'd be like, hey man, can I borrow your Barbie Corvette and have Bruce Wayne, drive somewhere to continue the adventures. I love that you said playing planets, because I took over the house. Like I had stuff all over the place, and you'd get there, you'd have a whole day long adventure and move from room to room in your house as you're playing it out in your head.
And to your point, I put a bat on my Barbie Corvette to make it a Batmobile. So
you nerd.
Terrible. Now I've completely derailed this conversation.
But I want to answer Josilla's question here about Granny Goodness being formed by life. Do either of you have a desire to expound upon Darkseid? I mean, yeah, that'd be amazing. Like, Darkseid's growing up.
I'll go the opposite way. I have no desire to. I feel like some people don't need the Stan Lee treatment. I feel like sometimes just evil exists. And that's how I feel about Darks. And I get that from Julian Lytle, who's my all too go-to on New Gods, and I should shout him out more often. He's now writing for DC Comics. Pick up his comics, got something in the new Swamp Thing special.
I guess.
But yeah, I like him as just pure evil. I don't need to know his sad story.
I'd be really interested though in the fact that Hegra killed his true love Sully. Like I'd be very interested in writing that story. Like the story, the sort of tragic story of Darkseid and Sully, and I feel like Hegra is really she's very fascinating as well, because she was like sort of like had this seizing of power and that sort of overthrow of her. I would like to, somebody asked, like, would you want to do more female Furies after? No, I feel like, that's done, but I would love to go back and do Hegra and Sully and Darkseid.
Well, if you could, just hearing how you came up with your ideas for the Female Furies series, if you were going to go back and like examine certain panels and delve into the canonical works of the Fourth World to create that story you just described, I mean, I hope somebody's watching this stream and calls you up tomorrow and say, yeah, I mean, I would love to see that story. But I'm with Tom on one hand, you don't need to know the origins of certain people, but what you just described to me is a story that's worth telling. And I would love to see you delve into that, because that's fascinating. As you were telling it, I'm getting goosebumps going, oh, I want to read this. And
for me, it's about the woman's story of that. It's like, how does Hegra try to keep onto her power, in a world that doesn't want her to have power, and, who is Sully and whatever that. So that's always the lens that I'm going to, sort of go to. So maybe in a way it's like what Tom said. It's not so much Darkseid, how he became what he became, but that's sort of that's the sort of pleasant extra that you get from telling this, this truly sort of power struggle between someone who loves somebody and someone who doesn't feel that they're appropriate for their son.
No, I mean, that to me is where the kernel of great ideas come from. Let me ask the two of you, how do you, when you when you come up with an idea and you know what you want to do, how do you approach writing? I was talking to Rodney Barnes earlier. Do you guys write on note cards? I mean, how do you outline? Do you just start? Are you a pantser? Do you write by the seat of your pants? How do you both approach writing a comic?
Who you want to go first?
Oh, you.
Me. Oh, go. I don't do detailed outlines. I do them in my head, and I have this theory, and it's the stupidest writer theory anyone ever came up with, and I think I'm the only writer who has it. That if I have an idea in my head and it doesn't stick there, then it wasn't a good idea.
I totally agree.
You agree? Oh, it's you and me. We're the only ones. Yeah, these people keep notebooks by their bed in case they wake up in the middle of the night, and so they can write down the one line. I'm like, if I wake up and have a great idea and it's not there in the morning, wasn't worth it.
I do have I feel the same way. I mean, I do have a notebook with me, and I do write some ideas down, but I don't wake up in the middle of the night and write them down. I do feel, I had a friend who, she claims that she would write a first draft of her novels, and then she would delete the entire manuscript and rewrite the draft, and whatever she remembered was what really was supposed to be in the story.
Interesting.
Now,
wow.
I'm not that brave, but I do think that there is merit to the idea that if an idea really is the right, it'll bloom again. In some way. So I'm with you, Tom.
I lost my first novel, Once Crowded Sky, which is not good, but it was a real novel.
I read it.
Oh, nerd. And I lost the last half of it or so. A computer broke down, and I lost. And once I went to like these underground. Please scrape this off my hard drive, and they couldn't find it. And I had to rewrite it from memory.
Oh, God.
When I was a baby writer, I didn't know all the tricks you do to avoid that. So I wonder if it was better or worse for it. Who knows? I guess I have a career, so it's okay.
I think it's the same thing. And the reason why I read it is because we remember I did that hybrid panel that we were on, where it was like hybrid novels that I put together.
You remember that?
San Diego?
Yeah.
yeah, so so of course, I had to do my homework. I do my homework. Yes, I do not write outlines either, except I do, like, for Batgirl and stuff. I did have to write like things out because things were changing all the time, and so that was very different for me. I'm more of a pantser. What I'll do is I'll write my favorite scenes. I usually write the end. If it's a creator-owned thing, like I'll write the end, the last paragraph, the last line of a novel or a graphic novel first, so that's kind of my North Star to sail by. And then I just kind of start writing my favorite scenes, and then I have a skinny skeleton, and then I fatten up the baby.
Now, do you approach comic writing and prose writing in the same way?
I don't really know anymore because it's been like 2.5 years since I've written a novel. I'm just beginning to like get back into prose because I miss it a little bit. So I want to write a new novel. So I don't know, but I'm sure Tom will say the same thing. Every project is different. And I don't know about you, Tom, but every project, everyone always says like, oh, you've done this 1,000 times before. You know how to write a book, or you know how to write a comic. And I'm like, but this is a totally new story. I don't know if I know how to write this story. So it always feels like you're starting at zero every single time because you're pulling a new world out of your brain,
One of our viewers, I think their comment disappeared. Meow Ryan, I think it was, said, yeah, here it is. Since Tom and Cecil, you're jazz musicians in terms of your writing. I love that too. I think that's great. Would you? And as a musician yourself, I don't know, Tom, are you also a musician?
No, my brother is a musician. My brother's a professional musician, but I am not. He got all.
I love the idea. Writing as a jazz form. I mean, I'm a huge jazz fan, so I love that.
I mean, Gerard Way and I talk about it a lot, like having been in bands and writing comics, that writing comics is the closest other art that I've come to that feels like being in a band. When you have a great collaboration with the artist that you're working with, it is like jazz. It is like a jam session, where you're both sort of, feeding into ideas for each other. I know Tom has great relationships with the artists that he works with as well. And it's just a pure joy. So for me, it does feel like being in a band again.
One of our viewers, the thing disappeared. They said, you be bebopping and scatting, and I'm losing it. Jozilla said that. I love that idea. Now, is it still possible when you are working on a DC property like the Fourth World, can you still bring that sort of, well, I don't know, jazz ethos, that free form? Don't they want to know what you're doing? And is it ever, when you're working on the Fourth World or something that maybe a Batman or a Batgirl, are you constrained a little bit because they want to know what you're doing? Like, you can't just fly by the seat of your pants as much as you might want to. Does it ever become limiting when you're working on these properties?
Well, I can say yeah, because for Batgirl, I had to, when I first came on Batgirl, I was in Year of the Villain, City of Bane, and Leviathan, and wow. So I had to, so my best laid plans were I had to do a lot of skating, so yeah. That yes, you have to, for me at least, for Batgirl, because she's not the driving engine, in the DC universe, is you have to be ready to surf with whatever's going on, and so they, and you also have to be ready to throw out every idea that you have, because suddenly I was in the Joker War, and so now I had to deal with that. So you're always have to come up with, you have to be an idea generator. They say, okay, that was a great idea. You can use that somewhere down the line or never, but you came up with that idea, and good for you. And now you have to come up with another idea, because here's the parameter that you have now. Lex Luthor's doing this, or Bane is doing this, or whatever, and how are you gonna live in that world?
It's funny because it's almost the opposite of what you would say, because I did Grayson, and when you're on, there's like, yeah, when you're on a book like a Grayson or a Batgirl, like editorial is much more in your face than when you're on a Batman or of course Black Label, because you have to conform to sort of this rest of the universe that's being built. And then if you build yourself an outline where you're like, I'm going to stick to this outline, you're fucked, because your outline is going to fall apart. I learned this on Great because Tim Seeley and I, who was my brilliant co-writer on that, we would make these detailed outlines of where this book was going. And every 2 issues, we'd get a phone call being like, Jeff's doing this, Scott's doing this.
Yep.
And then you'd be like, well, we just created this. So that, I think that's when sort of having that being my first book, that's when I sort of realized that like there's a limitation to the utility of outlines in comics, and that the real focus should be on making the best single issue you possibly can for this moment. Sort of.
Yeah, and that's why I say you have to be an idea generator. And I think that's probably the good news that Tom and I have learned is that you just keep, the gauntlet keeps getting thrown down, and you just keep picking it up and coming up with something, and it makes you, sharp in one way and sort of infuriated in another way. But it's a great and interesting challenge. But it does make it then a lot more freeing when I was doing Shade or when I was doing Female Furies, and I'm sort of in my own pocket, and so I get to be the queen and call the make the calls. This has been, again, these hour-long panels seem like they went by in the blink of an eye. If there's one last thought you could give, both of you, to our watchers, people that haven't read The Fourth World, what can you tell them? Can you tell them why they should read it?
That's an extremely good question. I'm going to ignore it and say this instead. I am doing a signing on Election Day in Philadelphia at Fat Jack's. And if you vote, you get a free comic. So I just want to promote that. It's on 11/3. I'll be there 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. with a mask on. If you don't want to wait in line because there's a whole plague going on, I have free pre-signed comics. So if you voted, you're in Pennsylvania, come get a free comic. Fat Jack's downtown Philly.
Thank you. I've already voted here, so everybody vote. So yes.
Well, I'm going to say that, like Tom said, you should read the omnibus if you really want to get sort of the whole overview. But I think you should read Mr. Miracle. Because I think you'll get, and I know that one, is very, very well known and very well read. And maybe people have not read the Female Furies, as much. And I would wager that you would like the Female Furies as well as, as fraught as it is. So for all of you who love Mr. Miracle, I think you should read the Female Furies.
Cecil, everybody in the comment section has been blowing up about the Female Furies,
as they should.
From the start of this panel to the end. I just want to say one thing, because I've been directing this whole thing from the background. I'm right now staring at Mr. Tom Brevoort and Mark Waid, who have been sitting in the backstage for about 10 minutes and just sitting there, just nodding their head. Like everything you guys are saying, you got Mark Waid and Tom Brevoort back there just being like, yep.
Hi, guys.
Everything they're saying is correct. Yep. So take that, for what it's worth.
Mark, I have some of the original art from Mark Waid comic sitting next to my desk.
There he is.
Thank you both Cecil and Tom. This was it was a real honor and a pleasure for me to moderate this conversation. And I love your work, and it was terrific to meet both of you, if only over the internet. And one day I'd love to meet you both in person and have you sign something of yours that I own.
Thank you. And once again, this was really this has been my wish to have this kind of conversation about the Fourth World with Tom. So this was a really great birthday present. So thank you.
And you couldn't have asked for a better moderator. I mean, if anybody loves the Fourth World and the Darkseid, the entire Kirby universe, it's Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett.
It's true.
And one day over that beer, we'll talk about Star Wars.
Oh man, I would love to do that.
All right, guys, we're going to take about a 1-minute break as we kind of queue up the next panel. It's Mr. Tom Brevoort and Mark Waid talking about the Marvel Universe. Thanks to all you guys. Awesome. Rob, I'll let you. Hey, man, stick around and listen.
I know. I love it. I just want to thank the Baltimore Comic-Con and the Mainframe Comic-Con. This is the 4th time I've worked for you guys. You guys I don't even work for you. I do it voluntarily, but it's so great. You put on such a great show. Thank you for all the work you do.
You're very welcome, and thank you guys. And I'm sure we're going to do this again. I guarantee we're going to do this again, guys. So stick around. We got about 4 more hours of Baltimore Comic-Con tonight. So stick around. We'll see you guys in a little bit.